Welcome back to another episode of Lit&Bruised, an Atlanta literary podcast. I'm Matt DeBenedictis.
And I'm John Carroll. Welcome to Season 2 of Lit&Bruised. We're back, and we're glad you're here with us, and we're glad it's late January, because this is when the literary community here in Atlanta is really getting out of that holiday slumber, kicking and screaming. Recently, Blue Stocking Society came back with a show. Teresa Davis just had Mad Men and Poets, and Write Club is back. And we are just as busy.
We are really bad at taking vacations.
Well, the show isn't called Relax and Read, Matt.
That's a very good point, because that'd be boring.
Well, we also have our first live event coming up on February 1st, and it is called Resolve, and it's going to be at the Highland Ballroom. So February 1st, it's a Thursday at 8 p.m. Show starts at 8:30 p.m., and we're featuring readers such as Teresa Davis, Nick Tukoski, Gina Rakiki, and Mike Jordan. We also have special musical guest, the Atlanta Instrumental Act, Crispin Waugh, and one of their members, Monochrome Sweatsuit. He actually does our theme song for the podcast.
And I got to say, even if this wasn't our show, I would be at this show. But I guess that's just like any creative pursuit. Make what you want to see, hear, read. And speaking of reading, actually, we like to read, and we're assuming everyone who listens to this podcast also reads as well. We've had some amazing guests that were on last season. We've got amazing guests that are coming on this season, and we've been collecting books from everyone, and we want to give them out. We have Elena Tucker. She wrote a cookbook, The Japanese Pantry, which is actually out of print. We've got that. We got a whole bunch of books that Adam Robinson gave us from Publishing Genius.
What's my favorite one in there, Matt?
Oh, your favorite one?
Oh, it's so hard to read. I always miss the title.
Yeah.
The Aleatory Abyss by Evelyn Hampton. I always talk about this book on the podcast. It's amazing. Definitely whoever wins this is going to be super stoked to read it.
But yeah, we've also got The Pulp versus the Throne by Carrie Lorig. We've got the 500 book anthology that was given to us by Winston Blake Wheeler Ward. Blake Butler gave us an early edition of his Scorch Atlas book, which is one of the most beautiful books ever. Basically, the book looks like it was ran through, burned, and then reassembled. It's out of print. It's hard to find. Another one he gave us that's hard to find is a book that he helped edit, 30 Under 30, which contains writing from a whole lot of writers that have nothing to do with Atlanta, but they are all kick-ass, like Matt Bell, Ryan Call. I could go on with these. We've also got Laura Relier's All Glitter Everything.
That's out of print, isn't it?
No, there's still a couple copies that sell.
There's like 5 copies left of that book.
One thing that is out of print is Tom Cheshire's Just a Little Piece of Heartburn, the one I put out years ago through Safety Third Press. We've got that. We've also got, which is another book of Tom Cheshire's, which is now out of print, that he put out through Silverstone Press here in Atlanta. We've got that book. We've also got Teresa Davis's Drowned. And we've got the last edition of Dope Girls. And that's just for this season. And we've got great people for season 2. So whoever gets all these books, it's going to be a big old box.
So this is just going to one person then, Matt?
Yes, it's going to be like a 25-pound box.
Wow. He has even more books that he didn't read in his pile over here. So, Matt, I have one question. Yeah. What do our listeners need to do to enter to win these books?
Oh, it's totally easy. You just got to put a comment or review about the podcast up wherever you listen to Lit&Bruised, whether it's iTunes, Google Play, YouTube, SoundCloud. At the end of the season, we'll pick someone at random, probably have someone else pick so we're not biased, and you'll get a huge amount of books that I'll probably end up having to bring to you because, I don't know, it'll probably be like $60 to ship.
That is a lot of books, so please leave a comment, leave us some feedback on your favorite podcasting channel where you like to listen, and hopefully, and maybe, you'll win these books.
I know we've covered a lot of ground, but let's just jump into this because this is the beginning of season 2, and this first episode, it was a really, really special one that we actually recorded back in December. We sat down with writer and journalist Jared Yates Sexton, who John and I have been friends with for some time now, after we saw him read about, it was a bowler hat?
Bowler hats.
Yeah, he read
good.
wonderfully twisted story about bowler hats at the Highland Ballroom, and we immediately were like, we need to be friends with this writer. And it's been a great friendship that has now came into a great episode. Jared's name has become much more known in the last year because of his journalism work in the New York Times, Politico, the Daily Beast, and his amazing book about his time on the campaign trail in 2016, The People Are Going to Rise Like the Waters Upon Your Shores, A Story of American Rage.
What's really interesting about this episode is we actually recorded it in his hotel room at the Hyatt in Midtown Atlanta after Jared had read at MailChimp for the Get Lit series that you and Corey Oliver actually host.
That is a fact.
So it was an interesting episode because it was a challenge to not talk about anything that would no longer be relevant as a conversation now, which is hard when you're talking about politics because the cycles are like 15 seconds. So we try to keep it kind of general, kind of not necessarily vague, but try to keep it as to the whole like what's happening in society now versus what was happening that day.
So rather than kind of skirt around stuff, we got really deep. Like seriously, we are in the weeds in this episode. Jared talks about what it's like to go from writing fiction to a journalism-based book, but we also get into existentialism through Eric Fromm, something relaxing.
Yeah, a little German philosophy from the 50s.
There also were some audio problems. I mean, it was our first time setting up on the fly, so you'll hear a little bit of static in there. Please pardon that. But one thing I did enjoy was watching you and Jared sit in your chairs because you're just sitting in these comfy hotel chairs, and we didn't have anywhere to like set up the mics, so y'all just had your drinks in one hand and then holding microphones in the other. Like you guys looked like Bond villains that were just like recording your memoirs.
I'm excited to listen to the episode. I actually haven't sat down and listened to it yet, so I'm excited to hear it because I'm pretty sure we were decently inebriated. And so, alcohol and politics, some people think that they don't match or mix, but I think they do. So anyway, y'all, thank you so much for listening to our very long intro, but we wanted to kick it off just right for you. And so we hope you enjoy the episode and enjoy the season. I've always wanted to record a podcast in a hotel room.
It feels sordid.
Yeah. Well, hey, we're back, and we're excited to be here for Season 2 of Lit&Bruised. Thank you so much for tuning in. We're pretty excited because we actually have a guest with us that we wanted to have in Season 1 and just couldn't do it. So, Matt, why don't you intro this?
Everybody, please welcome Jared Yates Sexton.
Hi. I like the idea that I'm elusive.
Yeah.
I like that. Like a Pokemon in the wild.
I need to play that. I haven't played that in a while.
I've never played that.
I thought Pokemon Go was really lame, like sounding, and then I played it, and I was like, man, this is kind of fun.
Did you see?
Stupid, but
did you see it's killed like 60 people?
Oh yeah, because
like
they went
60 people.
I saw people would fall off cliffs and stuff because they're like staring at their phone chasing a Pokemon. And it's like, I remember like when I played it, I only played it for like a month. My buddy was into it, and I was like, sure, I'll play it.
It sounds like you were real into Pokemon, John.
For about a month. Hey, I'll be honest. I was like sitting there in the house watching TV, and like I'd like open it up and like, oh, there's a little Pokemon outside my window.
See, to me, it just feels like a trap.
Everything's a trap. I mean, come on.
I didn't like the idea that you would capture the creatures and then make them do your bidding. It felt awful.
I mean, it wasn't. I mean, it's just electronics. I mean, it's like, you're a kid and you're playing like Contra. I mean, you're like blown away. Like,
oh, do not compare this to Contra.
No.
It's upsetting.
Not the Konami code.
That's upsetting. Up, down, down, left, right,
select.
BA.
Oh yeah, BA.
Oh, John.
BA.
Oh, John.
That's. I know. Well, we have Jared Yates Sexton with us, who actually just read it. MailChimp this evening for Get Lit, that is hosted by Lit&Bruised, Matt DeBenedictis, and Corey Oliver. And that was an amazing reading. Did you have a great time? Did you have a fun time, Jared?
Yeah, that was really great. I didn't know what to expect. At one point, I think I said this, I looked up and I realized I was like reading to steps of people.
Yeah.
And then there were people looking over the edge at me. It felt very much like I was in the bottom of a well. That was a new experience. I like that.
A well full of people in tech.
Which is what all good wells should be.
Your well never goes dry.
Yeah, no kidding.
Just a well full of people who can do code.
So, it's been interesting. I saw you read at Karis Books about 6 weeks ago, I think, maybe 2 months ago.
That sounds about right.
But it was great to see you. Hadn't seen you in a while. We go back some years, man. What, about 4 or 5 years? Maybe even?
I've been in Georgia for 6 years, and I think I met you fellas like a couple of months after I got here.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, so we're about 6 years in.
Damn.
This is what I like to call a quality relationship.
Aw.
Yeah.
Well, we like to think of you as quality. I was actually hanging up a poster for an event the other day that as an old reading I did like 3 years ago. And I remember we had booked you, and then something had come up, but like the designer left your name on it. And so I have a poster in my house for a reading with your name on it, but that you didn't read at. And I was like, this is kind of awesome.
I need that poster.
Yeah, it was for the Clue event that we did for Transgression.
What happened with Clue?
You had to teach a class or something.
Oh, okay, yeah. There was like a scheduling situation. That was a mess.
Yeah, but it was just funny. I pulled the poster out and I had it framed, and then I was like looking. I was like, oh, that's funny. Jared is on here. But
if I remember right, and tell me if I'm correct in remembering how this event was supposed to go down, I was tasked with coming up with a Clue character that I would embody.
Yes.
And so what actually happened was I got Colonel Mustard.
Yes.
And when I was a kid, Colonel Mustard was like the guy. And I remember playing Clue, and every time that I was like on the case, I always thought it was Colonel Mustard because that dude was a badass, you know? And when y'all told me to be Colonel Mustard, like, I got into it really hard. Like, it's like Jim Carrey preparing for Man on the Moon. Like, I was coming up with a character. I had motivations. I was getting in Colonel Mustard's head. And then, like, I had to, unfortunately, pull out of that event. And it really messed me up psychologically for a while.
I'd love to hear that. We've never really talked about it. Just because I kind of forgot about it, honestly.
See, I was listening to a lot of Warren Zevon at the time, and yeah.
What albums?
Oh man, Excitable Boy.
What is that?
Excitable Boy and Envoy. So
Boy does not get enough credit.
It does not. I don't like the song Envoy.
No,
I like the album. Oh, the song Envoy is bum 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 bum. It's so bad.
What's the album?
So my favorite
album to listen to?
My favorite Zevon is Excitable Boy. Front to back, it's the best he ever did.
You got to listen to Life Will Kill You.
Oh, yeah, Life Will Kill You is great. So the thing about Zevon that nobody talks about, but it's in every album, he was obsessed with the CIA.
Yes.
There were, like, on every album, there was, like, 3 or 4 songs that would, like, make mention
of... His father was an accountant for the mob.
Is that true?
Yes.
Matt DeBenedictis dropping knowledge. This is why you guys have a podcast. This is fantastic.
So all those years of just reading articles about Warren Zevon and his obsession with death and all that, it's finally paid off.
So when I moved to Georgia, I invested in this record player, and this record player turned into just this. I mean, you would know that I was having a rough time if I spent like 5 or 6 days just staying up until like 2 or 3 in the morning listening to records, like drinking whiskey. You know what I mean?
That's the best kind.
And so like Zevon made a lot of rounds, and I was just like CIA, all these international connections, and so my Colonel Mustard was deep in that. You know what I mean?
Oh,
so Colonel Mustard for the Clue reading, and maybe I over prepared because I can't even imagine what this thing was. But my Colonel Mustard was like into like arms trading. He was into like international like deals.
Amazing.
And like I worked so hard on my character, and then when I pulled out, there was nothing to do with him, and I was just like, I got to file that away. I got to do something with that later.
God,
I think you should write like journal entries.
Yeah, you need to send it. That sounds amazing.
You know, I don't know what happened. I really got into it, and I think the groundwork was there when I was a kid because that dude was the real deal.
Well, and we actually Colonel Mustard was the hardest one to find. It took us like 3 people till we locked one.
I was your guy.
Yeah,
I was your guy.
We got a guy, and he was very good. His name's Adam Lowe, and he did a great job, and he made him a cannibal.
Oh my god!
Yeah, it was like
no. Colonel Mustard's so much more sophisticated than to be a cannibal.
He went into the same
Adam Lowe,
but he made it a cannibal over time.
Yeah,
I like that.
So like each group got little hints because different groups would come in and then they would have to decide who they thought was the murderer.
Yeah.
So each group got a little more of like, is he a cannibal? And then by the end, it was just like, yes, he is a cannibal.
So I don't know if Adam Lowe's listening. and I respect Adam Lowe's.
He's probably not.
I respect Adam Lowe's interpretation of Colonel Mustard. Now that I'm thinking about, I think you could do a lot with that. Like Colonel Mustard could be like the Hannibal Lecter refined cannibal, right? Like he got a taste for it in Barbados, you know. Or
Well, it's like if you watch the TV show Hannibal.
no,
Oh God, man, that guy is amazing.
is that good?
That show?
I did not like the TV show.
Oh, you didn't like it? I thought it was so fucked
Wait,
up.
hold on. Is this your guys' podcast, or do you just talk about Hannibal?
We just talk about things. We just-
I actually have a question I want to ask that is serious.
No, I want more Hannibal discussion. Is what I want.
Our podcast is people like they come on and we're like, this is not an interview. This is a discussion. Because I mean, I figured, and I'm gonna let Matt ask this question here in a second, but I figured, you're talking about Trump a lot right now because of the book, and you're out there and you're doing this stuff. So, kicking back in the hotel room, drinking some whiskey, talking about Hannibal. I'm sure this is nice.
That's
right?
a vacation.
Yeah.
No, let's talk about refined cannibals.
Let's talk about Glue.
No, I'll tell you what. You guys pick network shows that I have never watched, and I'll just hang out in this chair and I'll
and you'll just
observe.
figure it out. I'm sure people will really enjoy that.
We have given a lot of Netflix talk, and actually Matt has edited a lot.
Yes, a lot of it has been edited out.
Well, I'll throw this out here, and actually, I've been waiting on this for a while. So y'all have met my buddy Ben Drevlo. He's a big guy, Mohawk. Do you remember that guy?
Yes.
Okay, one of the best dudes in the world. My favorite thing in the world was listening to Ben Drevlo talk about the Fox show The Following. Do you remember that?
Oh, I watched The Following.
Okay,
Yeah,
I watched
I've seen it.
Okay, I watched the first 4 episodes. It was a terrible show with Kevin Bacon.
Yeah, it was terrible. But I if I get into a storyline, even if it's fucking awful, I just keep watching.
Okay, so
I'm in it for the long.
So I stopped after 3 episodes because it was terrible, right?
Yeah.
But then Ben Drevlo would give me every week. I'd be like, "What happened this week on The Following?" And his recaps should be like the top ranked podcast ever. Like it should just be him being like, "Oh no, he was not dead." That shit was fantastic. It's so good.
The show was so corny and ridiculous that I loved it. It was like a murderer who had created a cult based around Edgar Allan Poe.
It's terrible.
But for the sake of creativity, the way that they would kill people was so fucked up.
Well, no, what they would do is it was like they started this show, and whoever made it, they were to Fox. They were like, is Standards and Practices going to watch these episodes? And Fox is like, well, do you want them to? And they were like, no. And they're like, okay, do what you want, right?
Yeah.
And it was really out of place. It was really terrible.
It's a really gruesome show.
It's really gruesome.
I remember watching it I'm not going to watch this right now. I need to go back.
This is my favorite podcast I've ever been a part of. Just this.
Because we're talking about Kevin Bacon.
we didn't start with a bunch of Trump questions.
Yeah, Matt had a question for you, and I will go into left field. So, Matt, take it away.
Well, I do want to address for our readers. Well, actually, not readers. What the hell is the wrong?
Our readers this evening.
Yes. For our listeners, I mean, many people know Jared Yates Sexton from his political writing. And we've known Jared for a while. We really kind of don't want to talk about that much. Because also, this isn't going to air for a month. So who knows what's going to happen?
No clue.
Yeah. So,
Trump could be evicted.
Trump could be emperor by then.
Yeah, there was news that broke while you were reading.
Okay, when you said that,
I liked evicted. I said it and you guys didn't even say anything. He could be evicted from the White House.
He could be evicted.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, actually, that's part of it, right? Is it's we went to a reading tonight, and I had to read about something that took place during a political campaign, and during the period of it, the entire paradigm changed, right? It's like when you get on a plane, John's taking a flight tomorrow. Getting on a plane now is the worst. You land an hour and a half, 3 hours later, and you're like, what the hell happened to the world? And everything's changed. It's awful.
See, that feels like hell. John, that would be like you let's say when you flew to England to read for Blackout Poetry, and you got there, and everyone's like, Blackout Poetry is really racist.
Yeah. Oh man, that's like that. I remember that girl. Yeah, and they started the. She had said something fucked up on Twitter.
What she said was, "I'm going to Africa. Thank God I can't get AIDS because I'm white."
Oh my!
She said that,
God.
and by the time she landed in Africa, the entire world was like, that's racist.
Yeah.
Like, she landed and people were like, your life is on fire.
And and I remember there was a hashtag. It's like, when she lands, or it was something like that. Oh, God.
It's bad. You know what it reminds me of? I don't know if you guys ever had this feeling. I think this actually is the best metaphor for the internet that I can think of. Do you remember when you were like in elementary school and like maybe you did something like bad and somebody went, oh,
Yeah,
you remember
yeah.
that? And they were like, I'm
Yeah.
going to tell teacher that feeling.
Yeah.
That's what the internet feels like.
You get that on there?
That felt very intimate.
Matt had to go around and put our foam tips on our microphones.
It's very loving.
Yeah, I tried to
so
be delicate.
Matt and I were at a reading the other day, and it was for the Muse A reading at Greg Murray's house.
Yes.
And we were having a conversation outside with Blake Butler, and we were talking about, and you and I were talking about this before this even happened, but we started talking about basketball. And I felt like you hated basketball, but then you were telling me stories about when you lived outside of Cleveland about that you actually saw Michael Jordan.
Yeah. Well, see, I don't really pay attention or even remotely care about sports anymore. I did when I was a kid.
Do you have jerseys?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. What'd you have?
Celtics.
Oh, that's very
Hey,
good.
I still have 2 jerseys in my closet.
What are your jerseys?
My 2 favorite players. And I've had these jerseys for over 20 years. I had them in high school, and I just kept them in my closet. Pistol Pete and Reggie Miller.
That's amazing. By the way, I just want to point out he can still fit into his old high school jerseys. How gross is that?
I
How gross
don't
is
wear
that?
them. I don't wear them.
Yeah, but you made sure to mention that you still
Yeah.
can wear them.
No, I didn't say I can still wear them. I said I still have them.
You've infused basketball writing into many pieces before. I remember like Write Club pieces where you have.
Yeah.
Do you wear the jersey when you write about it?
Ooh.
You know what? I don't, but I'm going to start. You know what? I'm going to, you mentioned I'm going out of town tomorrow. I'm going on vacation. Going to go up to Brooklyn for a few days. You know what? I think I'm just going to wear the Pistol Pete jersey just
You're
around
gonna fit
Brooklyn.
right in.
But you know what?
Right
It's going to be underneath my down coat, so no one will actually.
man.
Maybe I'll sleep in it tonight.
Oh boy.
You know, but so you saw Mike.
Yeah,
You
I saw
MJ.
Michael.
How old were you?
Probably like 12, 13, something
Were you
like that.
were you like? Did you know you were going to see the greatest of all time?
Oh, yeah, because he was already like at the greatest level, and no one cared about the Cavs then.
Yeah.
So tickets for games would be kind of cheap.
I think Cleveland would disagree with that.
I'm
They
sure.
were in on that team.
Yeah,
The
but
shot on
I moved
Elo.
away, so it doesn't matter anymore.
I love Craig Elo, and if you're listening and you don't give a shit, I'm sorry. But
Craig Elo might be listening.
Craig Elo, if you're out there, he was the shooting guard for the Cavs, but he was the one who had to guard Michael Jordan.
Ugh.
And it's like if you watch a Michael Jordan highlight film, it's like
Elo.
every fourth highlight is like the shot on Elo, the dunk on Elo.
It's Elo and Clyde Drexler just getting abused by Michael Jordan.
Starks would get fucked up.
Yeah.
Starks got abused too.
Yeah.
That's true too.
The team, though, that I loved to watch as a kid, and I even think back and appreciate it, was the Detroit Pistons of that era.
Oh, they were amazing.
Oh, you're talking about like the bad boys, like the teams like 89 and 90.
I mean, they all had their personality, but as a team, they worked as like a
They were-
mechanical unit.
They were fantastic. Yeah.
The Pistons are really interesting because whenever they do win championships, that's typically how they work. Because they won the championship in 2004 in the same way. They were like a college team. They didn't operate like an NBA team.
They were such a weird team.
Yeah, they were but they were a team, and that's the thing about it is. And God, we're having a literature
What a podcast
I know we're
this
talking
is.
about sports,
This
but
is great.
Have you guys written any sports stories? I mean, Jared, like you've written a lot of stuff over the years.
So I'll tell you this right now. Like, I would love to spend a season doing nothing but traveling with the Indiana University Hoosiers.
Oh man,
Those are my guys. Like that's my culture. I'm from Indiana. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
I don't know, John. You're from Kentucky. We appreciate basketball in Indiana.
I mean, I'm pretty sure that we've won more games than y'all have.
So on that note, yeah.
I know we have a gangster as a coach who probably buys his players. But
it's really gross.
Hey, we're
So,
still winning.
I would love for one season to move to Bloomington, Indiana, and just do it. You know, like the campaign.
Yeah.
I would like to just spend a year just engrossed in it and just like get to know the people, get to know, I mean, everybody from like the ushers to like the roadies. Like I would love to do it. I would love to do it.
Hey, so both my parents went to University of Kentucky, and my mom works for the University of Kentucky.
Right.
Why don't you go to Indiana for a season, and then I'll go to Lexington, and we can start a website called like Red versus Blue.
Do you see this guy? He's making money as he sits here. That would be incredible.
I can't help myself.
That would be incredible.
But like, I'll just go up there and I'll just hang out, and I'll just go stay with my mom and then I'll just hang out in Lexington, and then maybe like every weekend we can like meet up and like talk shit or something.
I think and there would have to be an accompanying podcast where we'd meet somewhere in the middle in like some kind of like
Cincinnati, right?
godforsaken dive bar.
Cincinnati.
Yeah.
We could go to go to Sudsy Malone's.
I'm in on that.
What is it? It's an hour from Indiana or Indianapolis.
Cincinnati?
Yeah,
hour and a half.
Yeah, it's only an hour from Lexington, but
this podcast just figuring out how far Cincinnati is from place.
Well, allow me to kind of reel this in a little bit.
Okay, go ahead, please do.
This is actually one of the things I do. We're going to try and touch on some of the politics stuff without really touching on it.
Sure.
And I got two questions. One, at MailChimp tonight, you talked about how you actually were offered that, like, you should maybe run for office. And that was something that you considered. During that time, when you're weighing it, looking at maybe I should do this, did you have a slogan?
Did I have a slogan? Okay, so first of all, I just want to acknowledge how bizarre it is that we're just a bunch of like creative writers. You know what I mean? Like, it's so bizarre that anybody would ever ask me to run for office. Like when people started talking about it, I was like, "Are you mad?" Like this is an acknowledgement of how bizarre our times are, right?
Yeah.
So I had a period of time where I was considering this offer to run for office. I started looking at numbers, and they look pretty good.
This was run for Congress, correct?
Yeah, this was run for House of Representatives.
Okay.
I still stand here and I'm like, I could beat that dude. Like I could beat that dude. I won't say that there was a slogan, but I will say that I have what I would say is a winning strategy of how I would do it. Mm-hmm. And quite frankly, I think that if Democrats have any desire whatsoever to win an election, particularly in 2018 and 2020, I would hope that they would. I mean, I've reached out to some people on how to do this thing, but there was a lot of thought that went into it and a lot of consideration. But, like I said in MailChimp, this thing is so gross. I mean, like, it was almost immediately, it was like being overwhelmed by special interest, donors, and just the moment that they sense any blood in the water, they're on you, which I think is really indicative of how terrible of a system this is. Mm-hmm. Okay, quick question for the room.
Yeah.
Running for office. How much money do you think it takes to run for office? Like, just to get on the ballot.
Like what office?
So let's say to run for Congress. How much money do you think it would take?
Just to get on the ballot?
Just to get on the ballot.
50,000?
Well, that's too much. That's too much.
Oh, 50,000, like, oh, wow.
I want to say it's like $5,000.
Oh, shit.
But here's the thing about it.
I was going to say like $1 million.
You're right. So, like, okay, but here's the thing. So they told me, they were like, okay, you're going to need like $5,000 to get on the ballot, right? First of all, that automatically like crosses out a lot of people who should run for office.
Yeah.
That's a lot of scratch.
Yeah.
Right? Then on top of it, they were like, okay, we think that you're a viable candidate. We think that you're going to tap into like the regular like Democratic money fundraising liberal apparatus. They said, we think in order for you to win this election, you would need to raise $1.2 million. How many promises would you have to make for $1.2 million? You know what I mean?
Like more than you could
carry out.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, you need to know that you win. Like, let's say by, hook or crook, you win. What do? You have to start raising that $1.2 million again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, the whole system's terrible.
And not only that, once you get in office, you then have to start raising that money right away. For your party.
Yes.
sitting in an office, making phone calls.
So let's say, for instance, and I had that moment too where it was like, the whole reason I wrote this book is like I wanted to make a difference in politics in the country, right? And then I was like, okay, so writing that book and all this stuff has been like as an outsider. Would it be better if I was like in, and I like had control over the levers? So what you just said is exactly right. So if I wanted to like rise up in the Democratic Party and like gain some like committee memberships and like some positions of power, I don't just have to do my stuff. I have to get a bunch of other people elected. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, you're making promises not just in your constituency, you're all over the place.
Yeah.
This whole thing, this whole process has been completely ruined by money. And that's why I decided ultimately to walk away from it. Is I was like, this is a bought and sold process, and it doesn't work. Like there's no way to go in there.
That's why we're here.
Yeah, there's no way to go in and be legitimate. And the great cancer on American politics and American society is money inside politics.
Yeah.
And that's why I ultimately walked away from it. I mean, it was alluring for a minute, but I had to.
I'm sure.
It was a lot. Like, I know exactly how to take the fight to my congressman. Like, he's not great. He's very, very vulnerable. And because he's vulnerable, and also because you have a terrible president, Donald Trump, right? Yeah. Like, it's ripe for a Democratic takeover. But the things I would have to do to win it, I don't know if I could live with myself.
No.
And that's yeah,
there's a lot better ways to live, and there's a lot better ways to affect change.
Well, not to mention I'm a short story writer. Like, I mean, my God. Like, all you gotta do is look at my archives and like, like I don't want to like be going on the nightly news. I would love to see
your campaign speech where you're like bringing in different literary things. You're like, I'm not trying to sell you on something like a Hemingway story.
Well, okay, so like you guys have been at a reading before, like. I have a story where it's about like American narcissism, where the guy's like running around the country like getting off while buying like bowler hats.
That's my favorite. I don't know. I think that's my favorite story that you've written, or the Jennifer Aniston story.
Well, okay, so those are so weird.
They're awesome.
They're so.
But yeah, if you were like running for office and this got like dug up.
Yeah, like I don't want to be on like CNN and like Jake Tapper's like, can you explain this story with Jennifer Aniston and tanks? I had that moment where I told somebody a long time ago, is like I had ambition to run for office, but the moment I published a short story, that was over. Like that really like put the nail in the coffin. Yeah, because you're not going to have an aesthetic, artistic conversation with the American public. You're just not. And like that story that we were talking about a second ago. Like I can't have my face up on TV with those words running underneath me. It just doesn't work. That's not the way this culture works, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. I would love to have a bunch of senators and Congress people who are like weird artistic people. Well, how great would that be?
It would be awesome.
Well, now, coming from writing fiction background to then writing a book of political journalism.
Yeah. Did you
find anything within your own fiction writing that you basically kind of brought into it?
It's all there. I mean, really, I don't know if you feel this way, Matt, but it's like, I don't understand my fiction until years later. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I had this conversation with somebody the other day. I had a student who, well, it wasn't my student, it was another student, and they were talking about their interpretation of some book. And actually, it was Don Quixote. And they were talking about Don Quixote, and they were like, it really feels like this book is like a psychological profile of Cervantes, right? Mm-hmm. And then I just said to him, I was like, that's what every book is, right? Every book, every story, every poem is a psychological profile of the person writing it.
Yeah.
Right? And the metaphors and the images that you throw in there, like, oh my God, Freud would have a field day with them, right? It's just a psychological roadmap of the author.
Yeah. Because if you're going to write, you have to inject yourself in there.
Well, how could you? How could you not?
Yeah.
Right?
That's the only way. That's how people connect.
I mean, I don't know about y'all, but I'm like pretty much the protagonist of every story I write.
Well, that's what people say to me. Like, we're among friends here, just you and me and your listeners, right? Like people,
all 12 of them.
All 12. We love them, right?
Yeah.
People all the time are like, is your fiction autobiographical? And the answer is no, but the answer is yes, right? Like I tell my students all the time, it's like, fiction is about hiding behind the shield and the veneer of fiction, right? We're all telling the truth. We're just putting up a shell, right? Yeah. So with my political fiction or my political journalism, yeah, exactly.
I wish it was political fiction.
You know, I said this tonight. Like most of my fiction has been about like the very, very brittle shell of masculinity, right? It's what guys do to try and pretend like they're bigger and stronger than themselves. You can't look at our current climate and you can't look at our current country and not see that is one of the largest issues at play in everything.
Yeah.
I mean, it's back and forth, and it just so happened, and I guess in a way I'm fortunate, but not fortunate because I live in a country where this is happening. But I'm fortunate where my philosophical and worldview are merging with the major problems and issues of the day. And so I guess in a way I was fortunate that those two just happened to cross.
Yeah. And, well, the reason I asked was going through The People Are Going to Rise, like the waters upon your shore, I had the same feeling of tone
Oh, man.
as An End to All Things.
I love that book.
Oh, thank you.
There's so much.
It's so good.
Do you know it's out of print right now?
It is?
It's very upsetting.
Where did it come from? Where
Atticus
was it printed
Books.
from?
Atticus Books.
Where did it come from?
Yeah, Atticus Books just...
I've drank like a half bottle of wine to myself over here, so I love that book.
Thank you.
I love it so much. You know what? I don't think I finished it. I feel like dude. Hey, somebody who doesn't give a shit. I got like three quarters out. I mean, I like finished like three quarters of it. No, but that makes me excited that I just remember that I didn't finish it. So I can.
Why can't this literary podcast get sponsors? Well, we do confess to our authors that we have not finished their books.
Well, so...
Yeah, that's a thick book. That's like
250 pages.
I know, but I'm just saying I got about 200 in.
Oh man!
And then like 27.
Just had to jettison it.
27 other. No, I really liked it.
That's the most John Carroll thing I've seen in so long.
I'm the worst.
In his defense, he talks it up.
He did
a lot.
Well,
like not just here right now, not
there's
just flower you up.
There's a story in that book about you having this like conversation / fight with a girlfriend while you're doing the dishes.
Yeah.
Oh man, and I remember like talking to you about that a couple years ago, and you were like, "Yeah, that was basically like true." I thought she was gonna like murder you with a steak knife or something.
Well, it was one of those moments. Yeah. So, it was one of those moments where you realize that like true intimacy is like you fall asleep with the person and you're taking a chance every single night that person doesn't murder you. You know what I mean? Like you share a house with somebody and you're just like, you're like, good night, and you give it back on the lips and you're just like trusting that the person won't like
wake up in the night and like decapitate you.
Yeah, but there's like moments certainly where you just look at this other person and you're like, I don't know if anybody truly knows anybody else, and I don't know. It's like I have cats, and like if I died tomorrow, those cats would eat me.
Because cats are soulless.
Yeah, so you're like sharing your house with people, and it's that intimacy and that trust, and trust is hard. I mean, that whole book's about trust. That whole book is about like fragile masculinity and trust, and actually bringing it back to politics.
Yeah,
the whole idea is that the people who aren't able to wrap their heads around intimacy and trust aren't able to wrap their heads around intimacy and trust with culture at large, right? Yeah. And if you're not intimate and trusting of culture as a whole, all of a sudden you collapse in on yourself, right? And you stop believing in helping other people, and you basically just are concerned with getting yours, and everyone else can rot and die. Yeah. So I think that there's a lot of those similar themes and sort of threats.
Think about that with the relationships in general. Before this, we were talking. In the off season, I struggled with anxiety attacks, which was awesome. But but it was very much out of the blue. A lot of traveling, needing to be a little bit healthier, whatever. But definitely worked through those things. But one thing that I came across, and this wasn't something new to me, but it's something that I kind of had forgotten about, was my anxiety attacks are very existential. They're almost like why am I here?
Me too.
That kind of thing.
Yep.
They're not like social, and they're not very much situational. Sometimes, I mean, being on an airplane kind of does it. But yeah, when it happens, it's always very existential. But I realized, though, that it made me think. I was like, why am I here? And I realized, for me personally, I love people. I love people, and I love creating things, and I love working with people to create things, and I love to promote people and help people as best I can, and that's my purpose. That's my why, and that really comes down to love. And for me, I'm just like, well, I'm here to love and help people. And
that's a wonderful philosophy.
Yeah, it's all I got, man. It's pretty tough. But I was thinking on these things, and I came across this book by this guy named Erich Fromm. He was a German philosopher back in the 50s, wrote a book called The Art of Loving. And basically he talks about that and it's very like philosophical and like it's a pretty deep book. I'm only about 30 pages into it. But what he talks about that the only rational answer for existence is love, or the purpose of existence is love.
Well, that's beautiful.
Yeah. I don't know how how rational it may be, but to me it makes a lot of sense.
First of all, I was hoping that we would talk about Erich Fromm tonight.
Yeah, I mean that's what we were going.
We aim to please.
Yeah, that was what I wanted.
German existentialist.
So I would actually say that, and we talked about this a little bit tonight at MailChimp. Like a couple of people basically, without asking it, they asked. They were like, "How do we bring these people back?" You know what I mean? And by these people, I'm talking about people who are pro-Trump, who have sort of turned their back on society, who have sort of shielded themselves away, right, from like a shared society. And the honest-to-God truth is, I think a lot of this stuff has to do with people who don't know their purpose. They don't know what they should be doing. They don't understand what would actually make them happy. And by the way, like humankind is just like a social creature. We just want to love and be loved. I mean, that's how we find our natural sort of, orbit. And these people, all of them to a person, are people who haven't found that. And I think in a way, like let's not sit here and hold hands and sing, what the world needs now is love, sweet love. We could.
I mean, after the podcast.
Yeah, we could
After
do that.
After the podcast, I think we should all hold hands and sing "Life Will Kill You."
I love all of it. You're right.
By Warren Zevon.
So, man, that's so good. He's so good. He's just wonderful. But yeah, I don't want to sit here and say that love is the answer, but it's like once people can start figuring out the direction of their life, and once they're brought into society as a whole, I think it can get better.
Definitely. I mean, through the things that I've read over the years and just different thought processes, and mainly in Erich Fromm's, and hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, but in Art of Loving, he talks about that what we do as human beings is that we conform. And typically when we conform, it's based on conventional wisdom.
Sure. Of
you become what you're around. So, and we do that because we don't want to be alone and we don't want to be separate. So we do everything that we can to not seem that way. So, when you're in a society or you're in a region, out in the country, out in the suburbs, even in the city, whatever you believe, whatever the consensus is around you, you want to fit in.
Well, can we get deep in the weeds? Can we do that? Is this,
Oh, yes,
is this
of
the
course.
podcast
Let's
for
do
Deep
it.
in the Weeds?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So this is some like existential shit that
Oh,
I'm like
bring
dealing
it.
with. Okay.
Bring it on, baby.
So, what truth I have come to is this: that we are all born into this world terrified, right? Like we are so vulnerable. Like there's no way to be feelingless. There's no way to be invincible. We're all incredibly vulnerable people. So what we do is we start to take things from societal expectations and we start to put them on like clothes, like layers of clothes, right? Or armor. Like we start building ourselves up for it. I mean, we're sitting here today, three guys sitting in this hotel room. We have all three of us through through experience and through life, we have created our own personas to live through, right? Like, when you get dressed in the morning, like, you're putting on a persona. You just are. Like, you don't just randomly put on clothes.
We've got our personas tattooed on our bodies.
Yeah. So that's the thing. So,
I change watches based on the type of conversation I'm having.
That's what I'm talking about, man. So it's like these, and I tell students this all the time, because students are like, "Oh, Professor Sexton, that I don't do that." And I'm like, "You are so full of shit," And they're like, "Yeah, I am," because the whole point is, we all are avatars of ourselves, right? We have decided this is the character I will play, and this is the character that is larger than my fear of life. And if you can get a comfortable avatar that is more yourself than not, and also accepts that life is hard and that you are doing this for a particular purpose, you'll be okay. Mm-hmm. It's the other people who aren't, right? Who just keep putting layers and layers. I talked about this earlier. Trump people. Trump's a layer, right? Yeah. Like, I'm a Trump person. That means something about me, right? It's an identity, and they haven't been able to find their true self underneath all of these layers of cultural conformity, and they're still looking, and they keep finding things. This is why people buy too much, right? This is why people identify to brands and corporations. This is why people, ruin their lives through any number of vices, and that is the truth, is we all need to realize that we're all like incredibly vulnerable people, and we're just trying to make it. And you want to get to existentialism, that's the root of it.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. We're all just trying so hard to survive and not be ruined, and it's nearly impossible, but that impossibility, I think, like, brings us together, and I think that's the deep in the weeds explanation on what's not going on.
Yeah,
is we can understand that, right? Like, we can have that conversation where we're discussing who we are and what the world is, and that means that we can live in the world and treat each other well. But the people who can't do that, and the people who don't even recognize that they're wearing layers and layers of armor and personas, those are the people who can't live in the world.
Well, and then people put more layers on. Sorry, John. Yeah, put more layers on when they deal with the conflict of there's the version of you that you present, and then there's the version of you that people see, which you don't have control of.
At all.
And people will put on layers when it's just like, oh, people don't see me as what I thought I was presenting.
Well, and we have a president, not to get too deep in the weeds on this, we have a president who is really pathetic. Yeah. I mean, he really is, right? All of the things about him that he presents to the world, which are supposed to be making up for his faults, right? He has this big mane of weird fake hair, right? Because he's bald. Right? I mean, he's a balding person.
Yeah.
And, like, when a person's bald and they try and, like, do something for it, the whole world sees it, right? Yeah. We had this conversation earlier, right?
Yeah.
Because I look like a weird-ass egg.
Yeah. So it's like he has this big head of hair. He has a fake tan that is obvious, right? It's just very weird and awkward, and like, he does this thing where he, like, shakes hands with people, and it's a battle, right? Everyone who sees this person and is boasting, right?
Yeah.
Everyone who sees this is like, that man's really pathetic. And it's that difficulty trying to reconcile the two. What he thinks he is and what everyone else thinks he is. Those are the people who are fucking angry, right? Those are the people who go out and shoot places up. They're the people who ruin things.
Yeah.
Because the difference between the two poles is all the difference whether or not the world works or doesn't work. And now we have a president who... and by the way, you never run for president if you are a secure person, right? You know what I mean? Like,
because you don't want that job.
No, you're you have to be a narcissist with a need. And I talked to somebody a while back. Like, Barack Obama is the most well-adjusted person to ever run for president, and the only reason he ran for president is because he kind of needed to prove to his parents he could do it. You know, it's like his dad left him, and he needed to prove it.
Yeah,
and he did, and he was fine with it. All these other people, they have like this deep, deep hole that it doesn't matter what they throw into it, it never figures it out. Trump will never figure it out. It doesn't matter how long he lives. It doesn't matter what happens in his presidency. He is going to be a deep, bottomless pit, and it's just going to continue to, like, get stuff thrown down. It's never going to work.
It's weird when you see people, especially at that age, that have that. You know, my father is he's a Trump supporter. Mm-hmm. He wasn't always, though. He voted for Obama with me in 2008 for his first term, and now he's... You talk about the things that your family does. My dad's probably a lighter version of that, that he is just step back into, and it's very strange to me because he was like a Buddhist and into this stuff like about 10 years ago. And he was very much of a light to me in hard times. I would look at him and I was like, man, this is amazing. And he's gotten older. His health has declined. He hasn't been able to really walk for the last 2 years. He's going through different surgeries. And I'm not, and I respect the man, and he raised me, and I love him to death. But when I have conversations with him about this stuff, which I do often on purpose, to be like, hey,
that's good.
Like this, because this is how you change their minds.
Yes.
You change their minds by having good conversations with them and saying, you know what, how about we just look at the whole thing and say the whole system's messed up, and why don't we agree on just aspects of life and purposes versus like a political party.
When you find common ground,
yeah,
that's where it starts.
Yeah.
If you find common ground, you can talk about anything. Once they believe that you're coming from a place of legitimacy and a place of care, you can do whatever. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, my dad, in a lot of ways, not his current state of being a Trump supporter. My dad's my hero in a lot of ways. Just the way he raised me and the way that I saw him overcome things in his life. So it's a bum out, but I realize that, to kind of go back to what we were talking about, I realize though that it is based in fear. It's very fear based. And Trump played into that, and it's everything that you said tonight at the reading of just talking about any time that there was a newsworthy event that could strike fear into people's minds. This is what I took away from it. That you didn't say this, but this is what I took from what you were saying was, hey, there was a shooting. He's playing up the fear, the Muslims, the ban, the wall, all that stuff. And my dad has subscribed to that, out of his fear. And I don't blame him. But sometimes it's just hard to look at somebody and you're like, you taught me love, and you're falling into fear. That's hard.
Well, the thing that we lose track of in this country, and actually, I was very glad, and it feels weird saying that, but so like we're taping this early December.
Yeah,
we just had the GOP Senate pass their tax bill, right? Which in essence was a big wet kiss to the wealthy. It was just like not even well hidden that that's what it was. We have a situation in this country where the working and middle class have been like really mistreated. I mean, they've been drained, right?
Yeah.
And wealth inequality in this country has reached a point that we haven't seen since the early 1900s. And what we're watching is we're seeing a lot of people, and I said this tonight, like, everyone always says economic anxiety, and they sort of make fun of it because, they all say it's just racism. It's both. I mean, there are a lot of people who, they have no idea what they're going to do. My family are factory workers, miners, laborers, right? What are they going to do?
Yeah.
It's 2017. Like, the factories are not coming back. The mines are done. What do? They're living in this small rural town in Indiana. So when everyone says, check your privilege, they don't see personal privilege. Mm-hmm. And they don't understand systemic privilege. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like these are white people, and they're being told to check their privilege. And they have privilege as white people. But that's systemic privilege. It's not personal privilege, right?
Yeah.
So my family is like extremely poor. Their lives are getting worse, and they're not being listened to by anybody. They're not being thrown a bone by anything. Like, they're not getting re-education. Education itself is too expensive for them. Their healthcare costs have been going up until like the Affordable Care Act. And by the way, they were just totally lied to about that whole thing, right?
Yeah.
They haven't been taken care of. They have a reason to be angry. They were waiting on someone to voice their anger. They got it. But it just so happened that he played on their worst instincts. And they are racist. And they are misogynistic. And they are Islamophobic. And he played that like a fiddle. And it just so happened that this guy was able to go up and be as angry as people needed him to be. But it just so happened that he also spoke to these other really terrible things inside them.
Yeah.
And that's the sad truth of it is, you're talking about your dad, and he's having all these like problems, these medical problems. The medical system is screwed up.
Oh yeah.
It's awful.
Yeah.
And everyone knows it, and everyone suffers from it. And it's like, you go into an emergency room, get something taken care of, and you're like yoked with thousands of dollars of debt. What do you do with that? And so you have someone who stands up and they're angry, and you're like, I'm glad he's angry. and that's it, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of anger that needs to be voiced. It just so happened that this bigot voiced it.
Yeah.
And people appreciated that he voiced the anger. And that doesn't mean that he's right, and that doesn't mean that he's somebody to follow, but there is a lot of anger that needed to find an outlet, and he gave it to him. And that's one of the reasons why him and Sanders did well, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, you had a couple of people who got up and they got angry, and people liked it. And so they needed an outlet, and they got it.
I mean, to kind of shift, you have to stare things dead on. It's unfortunate that it had to be this way.
Well, we talk a lot. I brought this up tonight, and just for listeners here, Norman Mailer has this theory of the two rivers of America, right? There's one river of America, which is that it's the myth of America, that America is great, it's always been great, and America trends towards justice, right? And again, like I said tonight, it's like George Washington, never told a lie, and all this stuff, and America is the shining city on the hill. Never. Not once. Then there's like the subterranean river, which is like all of the stuff that we don't talk about, right? We can't not talk about it anymore. Like, there's no way. There's no way to live in America now and not talk about the warts and the ugly. We have to.
Yeah.
And the presidency of Trump made it where that had to happen. I mean, quite frankly, we have the embodiment of all of America's problems as president. I mean, you want to talk about that's unbridled greed. It's unbridled narcissism, it's sexism, it's racism. I mean, it's all of these things that are wrong with America. And Donald Trump is just it. He's the one.
So I have this theory of how, and you're talking about meeting on like a middle ground with people. And I feel like I have a middle ground that I think Trump supporters and non-Trump supporters can agree on. So there'll be a library at some point, which is hilarious, a Donald Trump library.
Oh, my God.
And there'll be a statue there. There'll be a statue there. There's always a statue. And I just think we all can agree on the statue must be of Donald Trump making that face and fixing his tie after he pushed that dignitary for that photo at the UN.
Oh, I hadn't thought about the fact that there's going to be a Donald Trump library.
Yeah.
Oh, that's terrible.
It's just going to be tweets.
That's so terrible to think about. So, I think that this whole thing, first of all, I think that he's either going to be removed from office or he's going to resign in disgrace. Like, the things that I've heard and the things that I've seen tell me that's what's going to happen, right? You can't erase this.
No.
This is history. Like, this happened. Like, we can't just like put an asterisk by this.
No.
Like this was a moment in American history, and the idea that like any of this would be immortalized is, oh my God, that's bone chilling, Matt.
Yeah. And once the two rivers have combined, you don't get to separate them again.
No, it never goes away. It never goes away. I mean, there was actually, I don't know if you remember this, but it was when we were having this big national debate about Confederate statues, right? And Trump got up and he was like, oh, you get rid of Robert E. Lee. What's next? Thomas Jefferson? George Washington? And then the answer is maybe, right? Like that's a thing.
Yeah, it's like, okay, let's have that discussion.
Yeah, because I don't know if y'all remember, but it was like I was in junior high and everyone's like, hey, what about this Columbus guy? Turns out Columbus was kind of a prick.
Yeah.
Right? And Columbus did really awful things. And everyone's like, oh, yeah, I guess in historical context, like Columbus was terrible. Mm-hmm. But we're going to do that. Yeah. I mean, that's how this works.
Yeah, for every person you think is a hero, that person is also a villain to someone else.
Yeah, it's just accelerated. In the past, it used to take generations. Yeah. And now we're talking like year to year. So I think what we're looking at is like a seismic change. I mean, this is revolutionary, and I think anybody who looks at it as anything different than that is kidding themselves. Like this is very large.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
the glory of technology.
That's right.
The fact that that's the internet for you. People feeling like they could come out. Bullies hide behind the internet. Mm-hmm. But then it also gives people the opportunity to maybe not hide, but hey, you know what? I can shoot an email. I can send a message. I can do something. I can communicate and maybe not the first time I do it, I have to be right in front of someone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then the collective consciousness of the internet of like, hey, you know, it's the Me Too movement, you know, and that's the glory of it. You know, it's if you didn't have the internet, you probably wouldn't have any of this.
No, you wouldn't have any of it. So
it's amazing.
I'm a Luddite. Like I'm really, really wary of technology. Like I really don't like how much privacy that we've ceded to the internet, right? Like, and everyone's kind of in denial. You know, they like.
I'm not in denial.
Oh well, you know, it's like one of those things where it's like, you know, you talk about something out loud, and all of a sudden it starts showing up in like your advertisements, you know, and you're like, oh, I'm not going to think about that, right? Like,
we all just block it out.
Yeah,
it's the accepted thing.
Yeah, so we just blocked it out, but at the same time, it's the great democratization, right? Like it actually, I think that's fascinating that you said like the collective consciousness or unconsciousness. The internet is the manifestation of consciousness, right? I mean, it's our thoughts put into action, like on a page. And it's constantly changing, which is actually reflective of how the human mind works, which is revolutionary on a whole nother level. As a person whose new career completely subsists on the internet, I'm still terrified by it, like the way that it works. So I'm at this situation where you're talking about these two rivers meeting, right? All I can think about, we're all writers here. Let's talk metaphors. Two rivers meet. What happens? There's a flood. People die. You know what I mean? Like revolutions are based on death. They're fueled by death. They get real messy. I mean, if you want to understand what a revolution does, go look at the French Revolution. Like that's what happens. And you look at how this thing's going to happen going forward. It's not going to be clean.
No.
There's no way that we get out of this mess with it being clean. And people said to me, they came to me and they said, all right, you reported on this campaign. Did what happened in Charlottesville, Virginia surprise you? No, not at all. You know, I read that part tonight. Like I was at that rally in South Carolina. They wanted to kill dozens of people. Like Trump supporters want to mow people down. They were talking about running people over. They were talking about shooting them, all this stuff. Like, there's no way we get out of this clean.
And see, this brings up a thought that I've had just because I've always been a political junkie. And I bought into a lot of the pundits where it's just like, yeah, there's no way Trump can win.
Yep.
And, you know, in my mind, I was just like, yep, and everything will go back to normal. And I remember going into a store outside of Atlanta, which is very much a difference. And people were talking about like, yeah, I bought 10 more guns because if Hillary won, I was going to start taking out in the street. Those moments, these people are not joking. Like, had Hillary won, would we have had mass violence?
So what I think, and maybe this isn't the most pleasant direction to go in, but I'll be honest here. If Hillary would have won, I have a really, really hard time believing that Donald Trump would have accepted it.
Yeah.
I don't know if y'all have seen this, but when Mitt Romney lost to Obama in 2012, Trump tweeted a bunch of stuff like, we need to march on Washington. This election has been stolen. We need to. There needs to be a revolution. I have a really hard time believing he would say that for Mitt Romney and not himself.
Yes.
What I keep telling people, so I've been on this book tour now for a few months. I guess it's been like 3 months now. And people keep saying to me, they come up and they go, do you think that Robert Mueller's investigation is going to like get Trump out of office, right? Do you think we're going to get him? And I have to answer in two ways. One is, yeah, I think that there's fire where that smoke is. I've certainly been told things. I've in my reportage, I've found things. It's there, right? The second thing is, what happens if he's removed from office, right? Mm-hmm. I have family and friends who have been prepping for decades. They've been stockpiling guns. They've been stockpiling munitions and food. And they keep expecting, they always talk about the New World Order.
Yeah.
Right? They talk about the New World Order is going to take over. And they fantasize about an insurgency. They want to fight the new, the UN and the New World Order. they have been told for months now that if Trump is taken from office, it's a coup, right? And if it's a coup, it's a new civil war. I don't think people understand that. I don't think they understand that. And I said earlier today that America's bad at context. Far right-wing people have been killing people and bombing places for years. Yes. And we just don't talk about it. We just pretend like that there are isolated incidents. If Trump gets removed from office, unfortunately, I think we're looking at something very, very rough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like we should wrap up on that note.
That's sad. That's a sad
I literally was going to say sad. Well,
I'm sorry to be
Jared
such a
Yates
bummer.
Sexton bringing the doom and gloom tonight on episode 1 of season 2. Jared, it's such a pleasure to have you.
I love you guys.
Yeah, I love you too.
Wonderful.
I love the contrast. I love that you can just get into this ship, and then you can talk about Indiana basketball, and
what else would I do?
what else is there to do?
What else is there?
Yeah.
I mean, honest to God, it's like people ask me all the time. They're like, "How do you handle this stuff?" And it's like,
Indiana basketball.
I watch the college basketball, man.
Yeah, Hoosiers, man. Hoosiers, baby.
man. Archie Miller. Yeah, it's like you throw yourself into this, and it's compartmentalization. I mean, that's all it is.
Yeah, you got to find something that kind of centers you.
Yeah.
Gives you a chance for your brain to kind of just work in a different way, even if it's just a chill zone. I just rewatch Simpsons all the time.
Hey, it's The Office. When I was having some anxiety, just turn on The Office.
That's my anti-anxiety. It got me through graduate school.
Yeah.
It saved my life in graduate school.
Dude,
The
it's
Office,
so
man.
ridiculous
Yeah.
that I can just turn it on. If somebody's ever having a hard time, I'm like, I just go home and watch The Office.
Can we have a podcast where we just talk about the shows that help us with anxiety?
Sure.
Yeah.
Done.
Definitely.
I'm in on that.
Let's do that. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. Matt, any final words or commentary for episode 1 of season 2?
Don't die dumb.
Don't #don't die dumb. What a
Don't die dumb.
Thanks, everybody, for listening.
Have a good night.